All right, so first off, thanks for spending part of your lunch with me. I know, it's lunchtime. So I have a muffin from downstairs to whoever asks the best question during Q&A. That's gonna hopefully keep most of you here. So let's get started. I'm Rochelle. I've been working at Wells Fargo for 20 years. I'm the Pivotal Cloud Foundry and PKS product owner at Wells Fargo. I run the engineering and operations team. Some of them are in the room. The ones that aren't are in trouble. Okay, I think they're all here actually. So realistically, what we're going to talk about today is security through repaving, right? I know there's a lot of people in the room, and I appreciate, again, that you guys are spending your lunch with me. I only have one muffin, though, so you're going to have to split that between all of you guys. But realistically, 20 years ago, we used uptime as a metric for success, right? Everybody and their brother had these legacy servers. They were afraid to restart them. They had thousands of days of uptime. You couldn't really patch them because you were afraid that the disks wouldn't spin back up or the memory would fail. 2002, somebody said, really we should patch, even if it's just to do a sanity check. Maybe, maybe not. That's really the way it worked in a lot of enterprise environments that I worked in. About 2004, we're like, this patching thing's not really too bad. So let's go with once, twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, right? The issue is that eventually we get down to once a quarter, and then around 2011, 2012, some of those wonderful security folks were like, let's get on a regular patching cycle. Let's do it once a day, or not once a day, once a month, right? So I kind of skipped ahead. So why not do it once a day? What's stopping you from rebuilding an environment once a day? I can tell you that if you manually patch your environments, you're never gonna get to once a day. You're gonna struggle with once a month, and you're gonna really struggle with once a week. Some of the threats, concerns that appear because of lack of patching, lack of software, advanced persistent threats, the state of the environment changing over time, config drift management, right? That's a huge issue in regulated industries. Vulnerabilities, leaving things, using air quotes, that you don't want in your environment, right? There are thousands upon thousands of CVEs that are reported every month. What we don't want to do is leave those CVEs out on a platform, out in application code. We want to make sure that they're patched and updated. And then out-of-date software. How many of you guys deal with compliance and licensing, and then they come after you because some library somewhere is no longer under maintenance, or some library somewhere has a vulnerability that's tied back to a CVE, right? The issue is that unless you can manually, or not manually, unless you can automatically fix all of these things, you're not gonna be able to maintain this state. You're not gonna be able to deal with daily patching or weekly patching. So we're gonna fix that through the Pivotal Repave event, right? So the principles are patch early and patch often. Pivotal is a pretty decent company when it comes to delivering patches. I'm pretty sure I at least get notifications 2 to 3 times a week that there's an update we have to apply. And Kirk, who's in the audience here, and Paul, I know that they do a lot of the implementations of those patches. And we do them pretty often right now. using a golden image, making sure that you can tie that patch, that repave, all the way back to the image that you've gotten from your vendor, and that image does not have very old vulnerabilities. I don't want to say it's pristine and clean, because on average there's 30 CVEs that are reported every day. You have to do it through automation. There's no way to do this manually. It's not going to ever happen. If you think you're going to patch weekly or patch daily or repave daily, and you're not going to do it through automation, you are sorely going to have thousands of people, which is going to introduce human error. You guys have all heard this, I'm sure. Aim for cattle, not pets, right? Stop treating your servers like it's something that you want to stick around. Treat them like they're ephemeral and immutable. And then redeploy often, even when you don't think you have to or need to. It's just good practice. Just do it as often as possible. So PCF gives us a tool to do that, and that's BOSH. It's an open source project. It's used to deploy thousands upon thousands. Yeah. It's like thousands upon thousands of virtual appliances. We probably have in the neighborhood of 15 to 18,000 virtual appliances that are spun up at every given time in all of our PCF environments. Provision and deploy software, right? That's what it's used for. So we use it to deploy our foundations. Cloud Foundry. It can also be used to deploy other software. We haven't tested that yet, but I know it'll work because I know the underlying pinnings of BOSH. Large distributed system. So if you guys don't know, it's written by Pivotal, but it's based off of all of the work that Google does with Borg, which is their infrastructure management tool, right? And I'm sure those guys are in the room and they can talk all about it that they want. And basically, it allows my team, the PCF and PKS engineering teams, it allows us not to have to know what the underlying IaaS commands are, right? So they've got the cloud provider interface for VMware, Google, Amazon, public Azure, some versions of OpenStack. There's actually, I just went to the website today, there's actually more things out there now. I just didn't have time to update the slide. So how does it work, right? So the first thing we have to understand is how an application is deployed into PCF. An application is deployed into PCF, and I'm sure you guys have all seen this slide too. It's on the cloudfoundry.org website. CF push is pushed. It creates the app GUID. It stores the metadata in the cloud controller database. It uploads the application files. Then it stores those app files on the blob store in, or S3 bucket or whatever. The app is then started and staged. If it's successful, it stores that into the blob store. And then after it stores it into the blob store, it reads the configuration from the controller to tell me how many instances it needs to start up, right? But because this all works, this allows us to deploy a piece of code to the environment and know that every time it's instantiated, that it's based off of the same set of code that was originally deployed a week ago, a day ago, a month ago. Now, this is all Lance. My estimation is that there's going to be 19,500 plus CVEs reported this year. That's a lot. There were only 14,714 last year. 2006 to 2007, they changed the way CVEs are reported, so that's why there's a huge gap there. But even 2017 to 2018, that's a 30-ish% increase. The only way to keep up with the threats is to automatically update everything constantly, right? So, Pivotal is a great partner for us, but as Wells Fargo, we don't trust anybody anyway. So this quick diagram shows that we go out to PivNet, we download all of the bits and pieces that create the PCF and PKS infrastructure. We deploy it into an artifact repository. We use Concourse along with BOSH. We create, open the, uh-oh, this thing keeps cutting out. That's not good. We break open the stem cells, we deploy them into the IaaS provider that we're using, and then we build what's called a foundation. The representational foundation is basically one appliance type of each appliance that PCF builds. We then use a scanning agent similar to what Pivotal uses, right? And then we compare notes. Like our security vulnerability assessment team and their security vulnerability assessment team compare notes every time there's an update to make sure that we're not missing something that they've identified and they're not missing something that we've identified, right? So now we get into how the repave operation actually works. Our foundations are way bigger than this image. In fact, if I put all of the virtual appliances in one foundation up there, you wouldn't be able to read anything. Giving you some background, we have 25-ish foundations. Sorry, I'm looking at our product management team over here. And we have about 700 application instances scattered across all of the foundations. It doesn't seem like a lot, but we only started earlier this year. So we've broken this down into 3 phases. They're logical phases, right? They don't always happen this way, but I want to break it down for you so that you understand that when you deploy an application, and that application has a number of instances, and those number of instances follow a native practice, that they have the ability to be patched, the platform be patched, without causing customer impact. And we've seen this since we do it once a week right now, and we're going to be going to once a day by the end of next year. We've seen this probably 700 or 800 times between all of our foundations. So phase 1, all appliances are recreated with an image based off of the new stem cell that's been deployed into the vSphere data store. What ends up happening is BOSH takes this and says, okay, I'm going to go into, and I'm just going to deal with phase 1 for now because phase 2 and 3 happen a little bit differently. Phase 1, I'm going to log into the top left loggergator. That may not be the first one, by the way. And I'm going to tell it needs to remove itself from the cluster. When it removes itself from the cluster, BOSH has this manifest that says, hey, I'm supposed to have 9 of these things, I only have 8, right? But as it's removing itself from the cluster, it talks to the rest of the PCF foundation and says, hey, I'm going to remove myself. What I would like to do is shut down. Once I'm shut down, BOSH actually doesn't know what it is because now it's not registered to the cluster. It destroys it, goes out to the new stem cell, picks up the new stem cell, instantiates it, and then tells it it's a loggergator. And it does this for everything in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. The difference is, in phase 1, that entire section could go away, and apps will continue to deliver traffic to the end user or client. The problem is you're not getting your logs, you can't auto-scale, you can't deploy new code, right? So we only do 1 or 2 of these appliances in phase 1 at a time. Phase 2 are the virtual routers. They're the things that deliver traffic between each application instance. Interesting thing is there's a protocol that the platform uses that gets updated every time a application instance goes up or down in the platform, and that protocol sends a message out saying, hey, look, I'm taking this application instance down, or hey, look, this application instance crashed and I'm going to bring it up over here. When that happens, the virtual routers get updated with their routing tables. So BOSH goes in, says, hey, I want to recreate you. Virtual router says, yeah, I'm dealing with traffic, give me a few seconds, right? It quiesces the traffic. It, once all the traffic is drained, it goes in, removes itself from the cluster. That same principle of phase one goes out and says, hey, I need to copy the Stemcell into place. I need to instantiate it and call it a virtual router. It comes up, it does a canary deploy, make sure that its routes look like the other routes. Traffic starts flowing to that new virtual router. Very similarly, the applications that reside on top of the Diego cells, when the Diego cell does its repave event, it's very, very similar. It goes in and it says, hey, I want to remove you from the cluster. Diego cell says, I've got all these applications, instances running. Let me go start them up somewhere else. Starts them up somewhere else. Once they're all started, again, that message is broadcast saying, hey, there's new application instances for this application that are tied into the virtual routers. The virtual routers start sending traffic to it. They stop sending traffic to the ones that are going to be shut down. They get shut down. The Diego cell no longer has application instances. BOSH says, okay, now remove yourself from the cluster. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then in this image, we've got 9. We have way more than 9 Diego cells. But what happens is a new Diego cell is started with a new stem cell. It's told it's a Diego cell, and then applications through the course of the repave will get moved back. That's about the 20-minute version of a presentation that usually takes me 2 hours to go through. But since you guys already know everything, I figure I'd stop there. And I figure there's going to be a lot of questions. So I know George has a mic that he may want to pass around. He's one of the audio guys in the back. Or if you want to yell out the question, I will try to repeat it. You, sir. Haven't got that far yet. But it should work the same way. It should. But we haven't tested it yet because right now all of our applications are tied to Java. We're using it as a Java replacement. We got a lot of Java apps. Yes, sir.
How do you handle Java runtime sourcing like vulnerability theory?
So we also manage the build pack, which is tied. So one of the slides that is not on here that's on a much longer presentation is how the build pack is built. Our internal middleware competency center teams manage the Tomcat Java, JCE libraries, and all of that, and then we build the build pack based off of the Java build pack from Pivotal, and then we use our internal versions of Java and Tomcat and the JCE libraries. And then when we deploy it to a new foundation, we let the application teams know that their application needs to be restaged with a new build pack, and we give them a certain amount of time to do it. However, if it is a 0-day, one of the guys on my operations team will actually restage all of the applications. Anybody else? I can't, I'll be honest, from this lady right here over, I can't see anything because the lights are too bright. So if somebody raises their hand over there, please call it out for me. Yes?
Do you communicate any metrics around your patching or repaving story to others in the organization?
We do actually do a lot of metrics gathering and then deploy and then push it up a couple levels of management in our environment. And we do that because if we don't have a good story, they're not going to let us continue down this path and move applications to the platform. That's one of the reasons that we're moving applications to the platform is because we can tolerate a patching event or a repave event without customer impact, as opposed to some of the legacy models where they have to drain their load balancers and wait 2 hours and then do DNS entries and wait another hour. And like, we're trying to get away from that and go to a more automated solution. Did that answer your question?
Have you
We have other tools in place that are going down the road of doing weekly patching on legacy systems. While I would love to see BOSH do that personally, that is not the plan for the enterprise. But the plan for the enterprise is to put like most of the Java applications onto this platform, which will then alleviate a lot of the legacy and heritage systems that we have. Yes, sir.
What do you use at Java?
Concourse and BOSH.
So do you recreate your directors? Do you recreate your concourse?
I'm gonna have to ask one of my engineers that question. So I'm gonna pick on Kirk. Since he's sitting right here.
Yes. Yes, because we use the same tools we use BOSH to stand up Concourse. So we're able to leverage some of BOSH's capabilities to redeploy Concourse if we need to. Stemcell that's sitting on gets updated. If that has to be patched, we need new versioning. We use BOSH to do Concourse, and then Concourse to do the rest of the PCF platform.
So to answer your question, yes. BOSH to build Concourse. It's because it's being recorded. I'm going to repeat what he said. BOSH to do Concourse, Concourse to do the rest of the foundation. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How often are you doing repave now? Is
There
there a set cadence?
is a set cadence. And as of a conversation I had with one of the engineering managers on my team, we are adjusting that cadence to be more frequently, but right now it's once a week. Hold on. I don't know whose hand went up first, so I'm going to go with this guy over here.
As part of repaving, do you repave the credentials?
We do not repave the credentials yet because we haven't implemented the full version of CredHub to do that. Okay, hold on. There's two hands up over here. Ma'am, what was your question? 4 hours, 13 minutes on one of the larger foundations. I think it might be like 4 hours and 30 minutes now. I've 66 Diego cells and 35 other appliances. So virtual routers, log aggregators, stuff like that, yeah. Yes, sir.
So when you explain to the business, we want to repave the whole environment every week, soon, every day, how does the business react? Or what's the business's perspective on the risk that may or may not in general?
Yeah, so the first thing was when they ask me for a schedule, I don't give it to them. And then I explained that we have a pre-approved change record that allows us to do it any night after our critical online window. And then they go, well, how are you going to notify us? And I'm like, I'm not. And I will tell you, at first, it's very, you spend hours, hundreds of hours in meetings, right? But then after the first 5 or 6 times that happens, and other app teams are like, dude, we haven't had an issue yet. How many times have you repaved? And I'm like, I don't know, like 40. And they're like, okay. And then the other app teams start being advocates because they're like, we don't have to be on a bridge line from 7 o'clock at night to 2 a.m. when you guys patch. So your customer ends up being your advocate. The first couple of customers, though, you have to spend an enormous amount of time explaining to them, which is why that presentation is usually 2.5 hours. But I have to start with, like, what is Cloud Foundry? I'm glad I don't have to do that here. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you do all, like, 25 foundations? Like, what does that structure look like?
We do non-prod one night, and then we, depending on the type of update it is, we'll do all of prod in one night, or we'll split them half and half. Yes, sir.
How do you repave your data store?
The data store is externalized. So our S3 data store, our configuration database, all of that stuff is externalized onto enterprise managed systems. So we let them deal with that. The database for the applications? Yeah. Yes, they're all externalized. So unfortunately, as one of the most highly regulated companies in a highly regulated industry, the database team does not like it when we stand up databases, because then they can't monitor credentialization into the database properly from the way that they're used to doing it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so have you ever encountered a situation repaving a non-prod where something didn't go well and just had to say, hey, stop the train, we've got to do prod the next night?
Kirk, do you want to take that? Yeah.
Usually that stuff gets worked out in the lab. So by
Yeah.
the time it's rolled through non-prod,
We have 7 lab environments that we roll through before we do the first non-prod environment. And the first non-prod environment is labeled as the Enterprise Platform Services Proof of Technology environment. And then we do non-prod and then prod. So it happens 8 times before then. And yes, that seems kind of excessive, but it's to avoid that situation.
When are you going to go to daily? Start repaving daily?
I've mandated, and unfortunately, the first time my buddy Paul over here heard this was yesterday. I mandated by the end of 2019 that we do this daily. And a daily repave doesn't necessarily mean we're updating stem cells or paths or tiles every day, but it means that every day we're going to repave, right? So say stem cells and paths gets done on Tuesday and Wednesday, and Thursday there's nothing. We're just going to replay the pipelines from the previous day.
When do you think you'll start rotating credentials?
Let's talk after that, because that is a very long conversation. But the quick and dirty is we have to get them into CredHub first. So right now, the application credentials are not in CredHub as much as they should be.
Are you doing any automated health checks or application checks to make sure that they're coming back up?
A lot of applications are being monitored by APM solutions that automatically do that when they stop and start. Things like Dynatrace, AppDynamics, stuff like that.
How do you handle application availability? As in, are they running multiple instances within one application, or are they spread out across foundations?
So what we tell the customer is, if you only have one application instance, are you okay with me restarting it 1,000 times a day? And at first that kind of catches them off guard, and they're like, why? And then I go through the presentation again. and then I'm like, but if you have 2 or 3 application instances, you should not experience, the more application instances, the less chance of experience customer impact. So I asked them personally, please do mod 3 based on availability zones. I would like to see 6, but if you can't do 6, do 3. If you do less than 3, please be aware that there's an SLA for your application. And if your application says that you only need 98% uptime, expect that when a repave operation happens that it's going to restart, right? But a lot of the applications we're getting on the platform, the first couple were very small application instance counts. Some of them now have 3, 6, 9 instances. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Has the business value been quantified in terms of like where you were and where you are now?
I'm going to plug Jamie's talk because he's doing a value stream talk when? 5 o'clock today. Where?
At
Woodrow Wilson rooms. And if you want to talk to him and I afterwards, we can talk about how we went through all of the math behind it. But I will tell you that just in people saves, it's a lot of time. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
How big is your operations team?
We have a very large operations team. It's split into 3 specific teams. It's split into a run team, a build team, and then a product management team. The The build team is about 13, 14 people, and they're the ones that instantiate all of the engineering behind Concourse and BOSH. The run team, they do all of the runs of the pipelines, and they deal with some legacy information and legacy systems that we have to still deal with. And then the product management team does all of our risk paperwork. And everything else, she stared at me really bad. Yeah.
How much of your workload is under PCF, and are you using PKS yet?
We do have PKS in the lab. We just started playing with that 2.5 weeks ago. And how much of our workload in a percentage-wise, or how many applications do we have? Because if I give you percentage-wise, you're going to be like, well, that's not really a lot. And of course, if I give you the real number, you're probably still not going to be, that's really a lot. Just be aware that we started our production implementation. Our first app went out in March. We got about 80 applications in non-prod and about 22 in production. It's about a 700-ish AIs. But we're still going through security gating requirements for a lot of our applications. We have 150 plus in the pipeline. Anybody else? What's up, Paul? Who gets the muffin? All right, so, Mr. Ramsberger, I'm gonna let you decide who gets the muffin. No, I'm gonna let you decide who gets the muffin. So, I'm not even sure what kind of muffin it is. I think it's like a yogurt-based, like blue cheese or berry muffin.
I like the questions that talk about the volume and how fast we can get.
All right, the volume guy gets it over here. All right, any other questions, come hit me up. I'll be here for another 15 or so minutes. Thanks, guys.